Hi, everyone. Well, here we go again. We're going to our first official train stop of the life from birth to death, okay, and that's birth. I just want to bring up a couple main points, okay? With these instructor videos, I'm just going to try to accent the main points that I really want to just elucidate, make a little clearer for you, okay? There's a couple things I want to talk about. First is this idea of a critical period, okay? So critical period means there's certain times where the developing baby is vulnerable, okay? Certain systems of the baby are vulnerable at certain times, okay? And I think you remember that the word for something that could cause harm or change the development, negatively impact the development of the growing baby is called a teratogen, okay, or a teratogenic influence, a teratogen. It's not just is the teratogen present, but there's these little windows where the baby is particularly vulnerable and particular systems are vulnerable, okay? We've got three different types of teratogens. We have bacterial, viral, and environmental. Anyway, read closely on the teratogens, and that's a really important part of the book. I really want to emphasize that. The other thing is, if we look at, I bet if you were all present right here with me right now, and I'd ask you, what are the three parts? How is a pregnancy broken up into three what? You'd say three, everybody say it with me, trimesters, right? Why do we use the term trimester? I'll tell you why we use the term trimester. A trimester means it's 3 months long. All they did is they looked at the pregnancy is 9 months long. Let's break it up into three equal parts. It's sort of the doctor looking at his or her calendar and breaking up the pregnancy that way. The problem is trimesters are not a good way to look at from the developing baby's perspective, okay? So instead we want to look at what's going on in the development of pregnancy, and instead developmental medical people and developmental psychologists, but medical people mostly, who come up with much better terms, okay? So here's the three phases that make more sense from the baby's perspective. The first one is germinal. Okay, germinal, I have a little farm that I run and I grow a lot of plants. So germinal is really the idea of germinate, okay, germination. To germinate means to make seeds grow, okay? So for the germinal period, what's happening is the theme for the germinal period is trying to get everything set up right for the baby to develop, okay? So there's the egg, there's the sperm. The sperm enters into the egg, and we now have a fertilized egg. A zygote is the term we use, okay? Now, starting right there, that fertilized egg, that zygote, has to move about 6 inches, okay, into the uterus of the soon-to-be mother. So as it's flows along the cilia, along the walls that makes the fertilized egg move along. It's got 2 weeks to go these 6 inches, and while it's going, it's rapidly multiplying. Okay, and it's rapidly getting bigger and bigger and growing, and then finally, if it gets to the uteral wall, it has to now get a place to be safe to grow, to get nutrition and to be safe. So nutrition, oxygen, and to grow. So what it does is it comes to the uterus wall, and it calls what's called nesting. It's really cool on the video. You can actually see this occur during the video, okay? It's really cool that you can see it. So the zygote is here, or the blastocyte, they call it now at this point. Blastocyte is here. It's the developing zygote. It's just a cluster of cells that are growing. It needs oxygen, and it needs food, and so it's sucked into the wall of the uterus. It's called nesting. It nests into the wall of the uterus, okay? Now it's in the wall of the uterus, now it's safe, and now we can go, okay? We've made that long journey of 6 inches. We're now ready to go for the rest of pregnancy. That's first 2 weeks is called the germinal period, okay? The theme is getting in the right place in the right conditions. Sometimes sometimes it doesn't make it to the uterine wall, right? Sometimes that blastocyte stalls out in the fallopian tubes. It's a bad situation, okay? We call that a tubal pregnancy. That baby, that growing, not fetus yet, but blastocyte is in the wrong place and it can kill the mother, okay? If it keeps growing. So it has to get into the right spot, get the right conditions set up for the rest of the pregnancy. That's a 2-week period, germinal period, trying to get it all set up. Okay, now once it's nested into the uterine wall, we're all good to go. We got oxygen, we got food, I'm safe now. Now I can start developing. We call this next period the embryonic period, okay? What happens during the embryonic period is that you lay down, it's been growing, the blastocyte's been growing and growing and growing, and it lays down, these cells are going to become the spinal cord. These cells will be the brain. These cells will be the heart. It lays down the basic foundation that will be the major organ systems of the body, okay? Major parts of the body. And this takes between, about 6 weeks, okay? 6 to 8 weeks, usually about 6 weeks, okay? 6 to 8 weeks in there. Once that's done, all the beginnings, almost like you're planting the seed, okay? This seed's gonna be the brain, this seed's gonna be the heart. Sorry for all the farm analogies. Once all those seeds, those basic structures have been laid down, it's like, here's the plans for the human being that's gonna grow. And once we've set those all down, okay? Now at the end of the embryonic, and then for the fetal, which is from let's say 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks until birth, all those basics, beginnings, those structures have been laid down, and now what happens is they develop and they just fill out and follow the basic structure that's been laid down. Okay. Now, here's the question: what does this have to do with critical periods? With these periods where the baby's particularly vulnerable. Okay, here's what you find out is that, first of all, if I were to ask you which of the 3 periods is the baby at most risk from influence from teratogens, from things from the outside screwing up the development of the baby, would you say germinal period, when that fertilized egg is just quickly developing and trying to get to the uterus? Would you say embryonic, when it's growing and laying down the basic structures? Or would you say fetal? A lot of times when I first came to this, I thought it really would be germinal, because that's the beginning, right? Bad things can happen at the beginning. The correct answer is actually embryonic, okay? And it makes sense, especially with this idea of these critical times when the baby's vulnerable, okay, is that you don't want, if you're building a house, you don't want to mess up with the foundation, right? If you build a house on a bad foundation, the house won't be too good. So the idea is you don't want things to interfere with the development, as I'm putting down the very seeds that will be the brain or the spinal cord or the heart or the palate. How about, cleft palate is something that happens, as something, teratogen occurs sometimes, and we see a cleft palate occur because something interfered as they're laying down the seeds for what will be the palate, okay? So the most vulnerable period is the embryonic, because you don't want something interfering with the basic structure or something that's going to flow. Does that make sense? And there's a really cool chart in the book that literally shows, like, when the organ systems the basic structures are being laid down, and when they're vulnerable to influence. You should look that up. It's really interesting. Okay. So, if you only watch one video of this whole course, besides the instructor videos, these are obviously important. Watch the birth one. I know it's a little bit long, but it's amazing, and it really, really puts the genetic stuff we talked about last week that will be on the midterm, remember? It explains it better than the videos that I showed for last week. So if nothing else, watch that video, okay? And it's good. And I don't know how they got the whole camera crew up there with the lights and everything. It's a good video. It's worth the time. I watched it I don't know, 30 times, and each time I learn something a little bit more. Okay, so strap your seatbelts on. We're on a train ride of life. We start with birth, we're going to go to death. It's fairly interesting. I think in the future I'm going to break these instructor lectures into smaller chunks so they're not as long as this, so that like related to content. So I have one specific area I'll talk about. Okay, good luck, and I look forward to reading all your discussion items and see how you do on the quiz. Okay, take care.